In this video, we're going to talk about the truth behind why they removed the gold standard. Here's something they never taught you in school. The government stole your gold. Not once. Not in some dramatic heist with ski masks and getaway cars. They did it 3 separate times, quietly, legally, and most people never even noticed. First, they took the gold out of your hands. Then they took it out of your coins. Then they took it out of your money entirely. And each time they did it, they had a perfectly reasonable explanation. Each time, most people shrugged and went back to watching TV. But here's what they didn't tell you. Every single step was planned. Every step made the next one easier. And by the time it was all over, the most powerful wealth protection tool in human history had been stripped away from everyday people and handed to the people who print the money. This is the story of the 3-part heist. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. To understand the heist, you first have to understand what was being stolen. For most of American history, your dollar was backed by something real, gold. Physical gold sitting in a vault. And here's why that mattered. The government could not just print new money whenever it felt like it. No gold, no new money. It was that simple. Think about what that means for you as an ordinary person. If you worked hard, saved your money, and put it in a bank, and that money held its value. Your grandfather could set aside $1,000 in 1950 and know that 20 years later, it would buy roughly the same amount of stuff. Because behind that paper was real gold. The gold standard was essentially a leash on the government. It said, you can only spend what you actually have. And powerful people hate leashes. But it wasn't just about domestic spending. After World War II, the world needed a new financial system. Europe was in ruins. America had come out of the war as the strongest economy on the planet. So in 1944, representatives from 44 countries gathered in a small town called Bretton, New Hampshire, and they built a new global financial order. The deal was simple. Every currency in the world would be pegged to the US dollar, and the US dollar would be pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Meaning every country on Earth was essentially trusting America to hold the gold and play it straight. America at that point held more than 20,000 tons of gold, roughly 2/3 of the entire world's gold supply. The system worked because America was trusted. But here's the thing about trust. It only takes a few bad decisions to destroy it. Most people think the gold standard ended with Nixon in 1971, but the first strike happened almost 40 years earlier, and it was far more personal. It's 1933. The Great Depression is destroying the country. Banks are failing. Unemployment is at 25%. People are terrified. And Franklin D. Roosevelt steps in front of the nation and says, we need to act. What he did next was one of the most audacious power grabs in American history. On April 5, 1933, FDR signed Executive Order 6102. It made it illegal for American citizens to own gold. Not gold jewelry, not gold fillings. Gold coins and gold bars, the money in your pocket. You had until May 1st to turn your gold in to the Federal Reserve. In exchange, you got paper dollars at the official rate of $20.67 per ounce. And if you refused, $10,000 fine, 10 years in prison, or both. Let that sink in. The government made it a crime to hold the most stable form of money ever created. Regular Americans were forced to hand over their gold at government prices, with a gun to their head. And here's where it gets darker. Once the government had collected everyone's gold, they immediately revalued it. The official gold price jumped from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce overnight. The government had just bought your gold at $20 and immediately marked it up to $35. They didn't just take your gold, they made a profit doing it. The average American had no idea what had just happened to them. Most people thought FDR was helping, and in some ways, the economy did stabilize. But the leash had been loosened for the first time. The government could now print more dollars than the gold in the vault technically justified, because regular citizens could no longer walk in and demand gold for their dollars. The rich and the banks still had access to gold. Foreign governments still had access to gold, but everyday Americans, they were cut off. Heist number 1, complete. If this is the kind of content that makes you want to flip a table, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe because we're just getting started and it only gets worse from here. 30 years pass, the economy is booming, America is the king of the world. But behind the scenes, the government has a problem. All that money printing since FDR, all those wars, the Korean War, the space race, the massive social programs of the 60s, it was catching up. The government was spending faster than gold was coming in, and people were starting to notice something interesting about their coins. Up until 1964, American quarters and dimes and half dollars were made of 90% silver, real silver. You could melt them down and the metal inside was worth close to what the coin said on the face. But in 1965, quietly, with very little fanfare, the US Mint switched. Quarters and dimes became copper-nickel sandwiches. The silver was gone. If you look at the edge of a pre-1965 quarter, you see solid silver. Post-1965, you see that telltale copper stripe in the middle. Why did this matter? Because coins had been another link between your money and something real. Silver was finite. Silver had value independent of what any government said. And now that link was severed too. What's interesting is that people noticed almost immediately. Within months of the new coins hitting circulation, the old silver coins started disappearing. People pulled them out of their change and held on to them. They could feel the difference. The old coins were heavier. They rang differently when you dropped them. People knew instinctively that the new coins were worth less, even if they couldn't explain exactly why. This is called Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good money. When two forms of currency circulate simultaneously, people hoard the better one and spend the worse one, which is exactly what happened. By removing silver from coins, the government had quietly devalued the physical money in your pocket. And again, most people just went about their lives. Nobody went to jail. Nobody rioted. It was a slow, invisible theft that happened while people were worried about Vietnam and the Beatles. Heist number 2, complete. Now we arrive at the moment most people know about. August 15th, 1971, a Sunday night. Most Americans are home watching television when the president interrupts regular programming. Nixon looks calm, confident. He talks about protecting the dollar from international monetary speculators. He blames foreign governments for attacking American currency. And then he says the words that change the world forever. I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporarily. That word did a lot of work that night. 53 years later, we're still waiting for temporarily to end. Here's what actually happened and why Nixon had no choice. Remember that Bretton Woods deal, where the whole world trusted America to back dollars with gold at $35 an ounce? By the late 60s, America had been printing dollars for decades to fund the Vietnam War, the Great Society programs, the space race. The Treasury Secretary at the time, John Connally, reportedly told Nixon, "Mr. President, at current rates of gold outflow, our reserves will be exhausted within a year and a half." The French figured it out first. President de Gaulle looked at the numbers in 1965 and called the Bretton Woods system publicly what it was, a fraud. He sent a warship to New York Harbor and demanded real gold for France's dollar reserves, $150 million worth. The Americans had to hand it over. Other countries got the message. West Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, they all started trading dollars for gold. Gold was draining out of Fort Knox like water through a cracked dam. By 1971, there were $80 billion floating around the world. But American gold reserves could only cover about $10 billion of it. America was essentially writing checks it could not cash. And the checks were starting to bounce. So Nixon had a choice. Admit to the world that America had been running a fraudulent system and face the consequences. Or change the rules unilaterally and dare the world to do something about it. He chose option 2. And here's the part that should make your blood boil. Nixon didn't go on television and say, "Look, we spent too much. We ran out of gold. We can't honor our promises." He blamed international speculators. He made America sound like the victim. He called it a temporary suspension. And the next morning, the American public largely accepted it and moved on. The president of France called it a monetary Pearl Harbor. The German chancellor said America had destroyed the foundations of international trust. European exchanges closed early because nobody knew how to price anything in a world where dollars were no longer backed by anything real. But here's what saved the dollar after 1971. And this is a story for another video. America cut a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. Oil would only be sold in dollars. And in exchange, America would provide military protection to the kingdom. The petrodollar was born. And suddenly the world had to hold dollars, not because they were backed by gold, but because you needed dollars to buy oil. The leash wasn't just loosened now, it was gone completely. Heist number 3, complete. So what did all of this actually mean for the average American? In 1971, the average house in America cost about $24,000. Today, it's over $500,000. That's a 20-fold increase. A year of college with room and board cost about $2,000 in 1971. Today, it's $27,000, a 13-fold increase. A new car cost about $3,000 to $4,000. Today, about $50,000. But here's the thing that really shows you what happened. In 1971, a family could buy a house for about 2 to 3 years of median income. Today, that same house costs 6 to 7 years of income. You now have to work twice as long to buy the same house your parents bought. And while everyday people were losing ground, the financial sector was winning. In 1970, banks made up about 4% of the US economy. Today, it's close to a quarter. They figured out how to turn printed money into profit. Derivatives, complex financial instruments, borrowing cheap and buying real assets with paper money. The wealth gap exploded. In 1970, the average CEO made 25 times what a worker made. Today, it's 300 times. A A CEO now earns in one day what an average worker earns in an entire year. This is not a coincidence. This is what happens when the money itself becomes a tool of the people who control it instead of a neutral store of value for everyone. Here's the thing about all three heists. None of them happened overnight. Each one took decades to pull off. Each one was wrapped in a crisis. The Great Depression, the Vietnam era, the Cold War, that made it feel necessary and even patriotic to go along with. And each time the people who ran the system said, "Trust us. This is temporary. We're doing this for you." The uncomfortable truth is that gold wasn't just a shiny metal. It was a constraint. And constraints on government power exist for a reason. When you remove the constraint, you don't get a smarter, more flexible government. You get a government that can print its way out of any problem it creates, while passing the real bill to the people who can't print money, which is everyone else. Your grandfather's dollar held its value because it was tied to something that couldn't be conjured out of thin air. Your dollar today is worth about 4 cents compared to what it was worth in 1913. 4 cents. The three heists didn't happen because the gold standard was flawed. They happened because the gold standard worked exactly as intended, as a leash on power, and power doesn't like leashes. Now, what do you want to go deeper on? Drop it in the comments. Was it the petrodollar deal that kept the dollar alive after 1971? Was it fractional reserve banking and how banks create money out of nothing? Or do you want to go all the way back and talk about the Federal Reserve and who really controls the money supply? Let me know what you want to see next. Your comments literally build this channel.